Growing up, I learned pretty quickly that I was background noise in my own family. Not in a dramatic, I'm the black sheep way, more like I was the extra in a movie starring my older brother, Daniel. Daniel was perfect. Or at least, that's how my parents saw him. He was the straight-A student, the future doctor, the kind of guy teachers used as an example when they wanted to shame the rest of the class. I remember sitting at the dinner table, pushing peas around my plate, while my parents gushed about his latest achievement. Daniel won the regional science competition. Daniel's already getting offers from top med schools. Daniel is going to change the world. And then there was me, Alex, the kid who got decent grades, played soccer well enough to make the team but not enough to be a star, and liked drawing when I wasn't being reminded that hobbies don't pay the bills. I wasn't a troublemaker. I didn't get in fights, didn't skip class, didn't do anything to embarrass them. But I also wasn't Daniel. And in my house, being not Daniel was basically the same as being invisible. I tried, for a long time, to get them to see me. When I was 13, I spent weeks designing a poster for my school's charity event. When I showed my mom, her response was, "Oh, that's nice, honey. Anyway, did you hear Daniel got into the advanced placement program? I stopped showing them after that. By the time high school rolled around, my future had already been decided for me. I was expected to follow in Daniel's footsteps, go to med school, make the family proud. It wasn't a suggestion, it was just assumed. And for a while, I convinced myself I could do it. Not because I wanted to, but because the idea of disappointing them, of becoming even more invisible, was worse. But the truth was, I hated it. I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't care about anatomy or memorizing chemical compounds. The only thing that ever made me feel alive was graphic design, the way I could take an idea and turn it into something that people could see, feel, connect with. And when the time came to make the biggest decision of my life, I couldn't keep lying. I still remember the night I told them. We were at the dinner table, me, Daniel, my parents. The air was thick with expectation. My college acceptance letters had come in, and they were waiting for me to say what they already believed was true. I cleared my throat. I'm not going to med school. Silence. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. My dad's fork clinked against his plate as he set it down. He looked at me like I had just announced I was dropping out of school to join a traveling circus. Excuse me. I swallowed. I'm not going to med school, I said again, my voice steadier this time. I've already applied to design programs. I got into a really good one in New York. My mom blinked at me like I had spoken in another language. My dad's jaw tightened. But Daniel? He just smirked and shook his head. You're kidding, right? Daniel said, leaning back in his chair. I clenched my fists under the table. No, I'm not. Dad exhaled sharply. Alex, this is ridiculous. Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm choosing something different. Different? My mom's voice wavered. Sweetheart, graphic design isn't a real career. It's a hobby. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Right. Because if Daniel wanted to be a doctor, that made sense. But if I want to be a designer, it's not real. Daniel scoffed. Come on, man. Be serious. Do you really think you're going to make a living off this? Designing logos? He shook his head. It's not practical. Maybe not to you, I shot back. But it is to me. Dad's chair scraped against the floor as he stood up. We're not going to support you in this, he said, his voice eerily calm. I felt my stomach drop. What? If you want to go down this path, fine, he continued. But don't expect us to pay for it. Don't expect us to help when things fall apart. Fall apart. They had already decided I was going to fail. I looked at Daniel, half expecting him to say something, anything. Maybe not to take my side, but at least to act like I wasn't crazy for wanting something different. But he just shrugged. Your choice, man. Something inside me snapped. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the tile. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. Fine, I said. I'll do it on my own. And then I walked out the door. I didn't have a plan. When I walked out that night, I had my backpack, my laptop, and a couple $100 I'd saved from tutoring. No backup. No safety net. Just a stubborn determination not to crawl back. The first night, I slept in my car. It wasn't as bad as you'd think, until around 3 a.m., when the cold crept into my bones and I woke up shivering, curled into myself like that would somehow make it better. I stared at the ceiling, my breath fogging up the windows, wondering if my parents were asleep in their warm beds, completely unbothered. They probably were. The next morning, I drove to my friend Tyler's place. His parents were the kind of people who didn't ask too many questions, so when I showed up looking like hell, they let me crash on the couch without much fuss. Tyler handed me a Pop-Tart and a bottle of water, then flopped into the armchair across from me. "Dude," he said, mouth full. "What the hell happened?" I stared at the floor, rubbing my hands together. Told my parents I wasn't going to med school. They basically told me to figure my life out on my own. Tyler whistled low. "Damn. Just like that. Just like that." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So, what's the plan?" I exhaled. "No idea. But I figured it out. For the next few months, I scraped by. I picked up small freelance gigs, designing logos, making social media graphics, anything I could get. It wasn't glamorous. Half the time, I was working for practically nothing just to build my portfolio. But I was learning. Tyler's parents let me stay for a while, but eventually, I knew I had to move out. I found a tiny, shitty studio apartment in the worst part of town. The kind where the walls were so thin, I could hear my neighbor's phone calls at all hours. The kind where I triple-checked the locks before going to sleep. Some nights, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I missed home. Not my parents' expectations, not the constant comparisons, but the little things. The smell of coffee in the morning. The way my mom hummed while doing laundry. The way my dad would leave the light on in the hallway when he knew I was up late working on school projects. But I never called. If I called, it meant I lost. So I kept going. And then, completely out of nowhere, I got my first big break. A startup found my portfolio online and offered me a contract. It wasn't much, just a few $1,000s for a full branding package, but to me, it was everything. I worked day and night, putting every ounce of effort into that project. And when it was done, they recommended me to another company, then another. Before I knew it, I had a steady stream of clients. I wasn't rich. Hell, I was barely comfortable, but I was surviving. And for the first time in my life, I was doing it on my own terms. Then, 3 years later, my mom called. I was sitting at my desk, working on a deadline, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and froze. "Mom." My fingers hovered over the answer button. My heart pounded. After 3 years of nothing, why now? I let it ring until it went a voicemail. A few seconds later, a text popped up. "Please call me. It's important." I stared at the message, debating. Then, finally, I typed back. "What's wrong?" She responded almost instantly. "It's about your brother." I didn't call her back right away. I just sat there, staring at my phone, my pulse hammering in my ears. I don't know what I expected after 3 years of silence, but it sure as hell wasn't this. I turned the screen off, tossed the phone onto my desk, and leaned back in my chair. My office was quiet except for the hum of my computer. A half-finished project glowed on the screen, waiting for me to get back to work. But I couldn't focus. Instead, my brain kept circling around one thought. Why now? Why, after years of acting like I didn't exist, was she reaching out? I ran a hand down my face, exhaled sharply, and picked up my phone again. My thumb hovered over the call button. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I hit dial. She picked up on the second ring. "Alex," she breathed, relief flooding her voice. Like she'd been waiting for this call for a long time. I stayed silent for a beat, my jaw tight. "What's going on?" A pause. Then, quietly, "It's your brother." I didn't say anything. "He's in trouble," she continued. "His practice is failing. He's drowning in debt. He took out loans, more than he could handle. He thought he could fix it, but it just kept getting worse, and now..." Her voice cracked. "We don't know what to do." I closed my eyes. Of course, Daniel wasn't calling me himself. Of course, she wasn't calling just to check in, to see how I was doing after they threw me out. They needed me. Not as a son. Not as a brother. As a safety net. I let out a slow breath. "So what do you want from me?" "We just thought." She hesitated. "Maybe, if you could help him out." I laughed, sharp and humorless. "Help him how, exactly? You mean give him money?" Mom hesitated. "Not just that. You have contacts, right? You've built a business. Maybe you could." "No." The word left my mouth before I could stop it. Dead silence. "Alex," she said softly, "he's your brother." And she sounded genuinely shocked, like it hadn't even occurred to her that I would refuse. "He's in a bad place," she pressed. "If we don't help him, he could lose everything." Something inside me snapped. You think I don't know what that feels like? Silence again. I forced a bitter smile. You remember, don't you? How you and Dad sat there, watching me walk out that door, knowing I had nothing. Knowing I had no idea where I was going to sleep that night. She exhaled shakily. That was different. No, I said, my voice dangerously low. It wasn't. I heard her take a breath, like she was about to say something else, but I was done. I have work to do, I said flatly. Alex, please. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. The silence after that call should have felt good. I should have felt victorious, like I'd finally closed a chapter of my life that had been weighing me down for years. But instead, I just sat there, staring at my phone, my stomach twisted into something ugly. I told myself I didn't care, that I wasn't going to let them use me, that I owed them nothing. But no matter how many times I repeated it in my head, it didn't stop the memories from creeping in. The nights I spent curled up on a lumpy couch in Tyler's basement, the days when I counted loose change just to buy food, the months I spent clawing my way up from nothing while they pretended I didn't exist. And now, when it was Daniel who had fallen, now they cared. I clenched my jaw, shut my laptop, and stood up. Work wasn't happening tonight. 2 days passed before the next message came. This time, it was from Daniel. I get it. You're pissed. Fine. But don't pretend you don't understand what it's like to have everything on your shoulders. Just meet me. One coffee. That's all I'm asking. I stared at the screen, rereading the words over and over. A week ago, I would have ignored it. Hell, maybe I should have. But something about the message got under my skin. Maybe it was the fact that he actually reached out himself instead of letting Mom do it for him. Maybe it was the way he admitted, however vaguely, that I had a right to be angry. Or maybe I just wanted to see what he looked like now that the weight of being the perfect son had finally crushed him. So, against my better judgment, I replied. Fine. We met at a small cafe downtown. Neutral ground. I got there first and ordered a black coffee, mostly to keep my hands busy. The place was quiet, the kind of spot where freelancers camped out with laptops and noise-canceling headphones. I sat near the window, watching the city move outside, trying to convince myself I wasn't nervous. Then Daniel walked in, and for the first time in years, I saw him as not perfect. His suit was wrinkled, like he'd been wearing it for days. His hair, which was always perfectly styled, was slightly disheveled. There were dark circles under his eyes, and when he spotted me, he hesitated, just for a second, before walking over. Hey, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Hey. Silence stretched between us. For years, we had nothing to say to each other. Now, suddenly, we were supposed to have a conversation? Daniel rubbed a hand over his face. I didn't think you'd actually show up. Yeah, well. I set my cup down. I was curious. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Curious about what? I tilted my head. About what failure looks like on you. He flinched. Just a little. But I caught it. I should have felt satisfaction in that. I didn't. He exhaled, tapping his fingers against the table. I screwed up. I stayed silent. I thought I could handle it, he continued. The practice, the loans, the pressure. But it got out of control. And now, he trailed off, shaking his head. Now I'm in deep. I studied him carefully. And you expect me to fix it? His jaw tightened. No, I don't expect you to do anything. He hesitated. I don't know. I thought maybe you'd understand. Understand? The audacity of it almost made me laugh. Understand what, exactly? I said, my voice sharp. That you were given everything and still managed to fuck it up? He exhaled slowly. It's not that simple, isn't it? I leaned back. You had every advantage, Daniel. Every door opened for you. Every safety net in place. And now, when things don't go your way, you're sitting here expecting me to what? Sympathize. I'm not asking for your sympathy, Alex. I raised an eyebrow. No. He hesitated. And there it was. The crack in his voice, the tension in his posture. He wasn't just here to talk. He was here because he was desperate. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. You know what's funny? I said quietly. When I left, you didn't say a damn word. Not one. Daniel swallowed. No. I shook my head. You sat there and watched while they turned their backs on me. You let them kick me out. And now you want me to help you. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. I was a kid too, Alex. I let out a cold laugh. You were 18. He flinched again. I should have felt good about it. But all I felt was tired. Daniel sighed. rubbing a hand over his face. Look, I know I fucked up. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But he exhaled. I don't know what else to do. For the first time since he walked in, he looked at me, not as the perfect older brother, not as the golden child, but as someone who was lost. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I just felt empty. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I'm not giving you money. Daniel nodded slowly. I figured. But I hesitated. If you're serious about fixing this, I can point you in the right direction. No guarantees, but I know people. Business consultants, financial advisors. If you actually listen, maybe you can pull yourself out of this. He blinked, like he hadn't expected me to say that. Why? I shrugged. Because I'm not like mom and dad. Daniel swallowed, then nodded. Okay. We sat there for a while. For the first time in our lives, on equal ground. I didn't expect Daniel to actually take my advice. When I gave him the names of a few business consultants, I figured he'd ignore them. Maybe let his pride get in the way. Maybe let the mess swallow him whole. But a few weeks later, I got a text. Met with one of the guys you recommended. Got a plan in place. It's gonna be rough, but thanks. I stared at the message for a long time. Not an apology. Not some dramatic confession. Just acknowledgement. And somehow that was enough. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I sat at my desk, looking out the window of my office. My office, in a sleek high-rise downtown. My business had grown far beyond what I had imagined when I first started. I had a team now, an actual company with real clients. I wasn't just scraping by anymore. I had built something, and I had done it without them. A knock at the door pulled me out of my thoughts. My assistant, Leah, poked her head in. Hey, your next meeting's in 10. Just a heads up. I nodded. Thanks. She hesitated. Everything good? I glanced at my phone one last time before locking it and sliding it into my desk drawer. Yeah, I said, standing up. Everything's good. Months passed. Daniel and I didn't talk much, but I heard through mutual contacts that he was making progress. Slowly, painfully, but he was crawling his way out of the mess he had made. And my parents? Radio silence. Until one night, I got another call from my mom. I let it go to voicemail. But when I listened to the message later, something in her voice caught me off guard. She sounded tired, worn down in a way I'd never heard before. Alex, she said, her voice softer than I remembered. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I don't blame you, but I just wanted to say that I'm sorry. For everything. We should have supported you. We should have been better parents. And I know it's too late, but I wanted you to know that we're proud of you. A long pause. Then, almost a whisper, I miss you. The message ended. I sat there for a long time, my phone still in my hand. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just felt hollow. Like the apology I had been waiting for wasn't as satisfying as I thought it would be. Because the truth was, I had already moved on. I had found my own success. My own family. The friends and colleagues who had supported me when my real family didn't. I didn't need their approval anymore. And that realization hit harder than anything my parents had ever said to me. I never called her back. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. But because, for the first time in my life, I didn't need their validation. And that was the most freeing thing of all.